Are you expecting free Wi-Fi on that bus that says free Wi-Fi? That's adorable. Don't expect it. I'm looking and I'm like, fuck. I bought a ticket for 3:30 in the morning instead of 3:30 at night. Check on each other. Checks and balances. It's a great thing. If you're flying solo, you're fucked. What is up, my friend? This is Jason with the Nomad Experiment. You're home for all things facing the fear and getting over the hurdles and getting yourself out there like I'm doing, kind of just rolling with the punches and figuring it out as I go. So I met a new friend at the hostel the other day and we're talking about travel, and I was like, what are you going to do in 2020? Like, what's one of your goals? And he said, probably to take a tour bus from one country to another country, or a tour bus through a country. And I thought to myself, man, it was just a year or two ago that I took my first bus in Mexico and I had no clue what I was doing and I was scared shitless. And now I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, and I've traveled across 3 or 4 countries on this trip alone. It still makes me nervous, but there's a lot of things that I've learned since that I think might be able to help you out here. So here we go. Tips for taking your first tour bus or train ride in an international country or from one country to the next. And again, this goes for buses and trains. They're a little bit different animals, but honestly, 90% of this stuff kind of covers both. So before buying your ticket, you're gonna start doing some research, and you're gonna start using the interwebs, and you're gonna start using apps. First thing to remember is you might find different tickets depending on what you're looking at. So for instance, the other day I was getting a bus from Vienna to Prague, and I was looking on a certain carrier because I had taken them before, and I was like, well, I'll go to their website. I'm looking on their website and I'm like, man, I know it should be cheaper than this based on everything I had heard. So then I went to an aggregator site, which is kind of like Trivago, Hostel World, Kayak. These are all aggregator sites. They pull in from all the different sources and then they give their best bet on cost. Well, sometimes those sites actually get deals that aren't shown on the actual carrier site. And that's exactly what happened to me. The cheapest ticket on the carrier site was 28 euros, and on an aggregator site, I found it for 15 euros. So always check 2 or 3 sources before you buy tickets. If you're gonna use incognito mode or use a private browser, that's even better. Whenever possible, always leave at least an hour between connections. You'd be surprised how many buses and trains run drastically late. And if you know that you're actually getting another bus and you're buying it all as one ticket, a lot of these aggregator sites and even the specific carrier sites, they will close the gap so that your trip is shorter, because most people look at it and they go, oh, I want the shortest trip. But what might happen is you end up overlooking the fact that you only have 15 minutes between connections. I was literally on a bus from Bratislava the other day. It was a 2-hour and 15-minute bus ride, and our bus broke down at the entrance to the bus station, and they wouldn't let anybody off the bus for 20 minutes. And they never even communicated it to anybody. We'll get into that later. Communication is a problem. But essentially, you never know what's gonna slow you down. I was on a train ride here to Prague, 4-hour train ride. You wouldn't think that a train on rails that doesn't have to deal with too much traffic would end up late. It ended up 30 minutes late. So always give yourself at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half if you're getting a connection and having to jump from one train or bus to the other. It'll give you a lot less stress, and it'll just make it a lot easier, because if you miss that second connection, now you're scrambling and you're just hoping that there's a seat on something else, or that there's even another bus leaving that day. So don't put yourself in that situation. Never get seats near the bathroom. I'm not gonna explain that one to you. If you don't understand that one, put it in the comments. I'll make another video. Digital tickets are great. Getting your ticket on your phone, that's fantastic. But I've had too many horror stories from other travelers where their phones died, or their phones got cracked, or they simply lost their phone literally en route to the train station, and then they're stuck. So if you have the opportunity, print out your ticket and use the digital ticket. Keep that printed ticket in your pocket, use the digital ticket. If you don't need the printed one, recycle it later. But it's always best to have a backup. Do I have it all the time? No, but it is a good habit that I try to keep. If I'm staying in hostels, they'll usually let me email it to them and they'll print it off for me. Any hotel, they're gonna print it off for you, but always safety first on your tickets. Okay, so all of that stuff is before you even get to the bus station or the train station. You've got your ticket, you've got it printed out, you know you're not sitting next to the shitter. So now you're heading to the bus or the train station, and there's a whole nother set of tips. So first things first, back to giving yourself plenty of time, show up early. And I'm talking about like plan to be there an hour early. Don't forget how long it takes you to get from your hotel or your hostel to the bus station. I was in Mexico City, 4 kilometers from the bus station, and it took an Uber 45 minutes for me to get there. I was literally running with my bags across traffic because we were trying to get to a bus station that I could see, and I was like, dude, I gotta go. Got out, started running, barely caught my bus. So always plan to get there about an hour early, but by getting there early, you can get a feel for where you're at. Every bus station is different. Every train station is different. I was in a train station yesterday. It literally had 2 rails. That was it. It was 1 platform, 2 rails, and that was the main station in that certain place. Got to Prague, their main station has dozens and dozens of trains, and it's multi-layered, and it's got a subway in it, and it's got trains and buses coming out of it. It's massive. It was overwhelmed. So if you don't know exactly what you're in for, just factor in the time, get there, and enjoy the environment. Always have your passport handy. A lot of people say, it's no worries, you're in the Schengen, they don't even check your passport. I've talked to friends that were on the exact same buses, on the exact same carriers, on a different day, and one day they were asked for their passport, the next day another person was not asked for their passport. Some people were turned away because they didn't have their passport and an ID wouldn't do. You just never know. It depends on who's working that day and what kind of pissy attitude they're in or what kind of great attitude they're in. But just have your passport handy, especially if you know that you're going over country borders. Don't be that jackass in line that is like, oh, you need to see my passport when there's 30 people standing behind you to get their seat and they all have their passport in their hands. It's just good practice and your life's gonna be a lot easier if you keep that passport handy. You should be having it if you're traveling internationally anyway, so I always wanna get eyes on my passport at least once a day just so that I know I haven't lost it. Always keep your valuables on you and your electronics on you, on your personal item bag that is going with you inside the cab of the bus. This doesn't necessarily pertain to trains because a lot of times on those trains you're taking your luggage actually into the train and it's right there next to you. But on buses, you're taking your personal items onto the bus and your luggage is actually going underneath the bus in a storage bay. Sometimes this process is kind of haphazard. Sometimes they're kind of just chucking them in there. You don't get a ticket. You just kind of look at it, go in there and you're like, oh, that's it? I'm a little nervous about this situation. But depending on the country, that's how it is. On the back end of that, a lot of times people are getting on and off the buses while you're still sitting on there and they're opening up those holds and those attendants are just kind of handing bags out. It's just not very organized and I have these terrible thoughts of somebody going, that bag looks pretty nice. I think I'll take it home with me. And by the time you realize somebody lifted your bag, it's gone. Sorry, it's the reality of it. So that's never happened to me. I'm just paranoid, but bottom line is take your valuables, take your electronics, and make sure you keep them with you on the bus. With that whole baggage thing and the fact that your baggage goes into a storage hold, make sure you pay attention that bus might be going to different destinations along the way. And that usually means where they store your bags is destination dependent. So for instance, on the way to Prague, there was an intermittent stop at the airport and they had put all of those bags in one spot and all the bags that were going to Prague in another spot. If you just ignore these attendants and throw your bags on there because you saw somebody else throw their bag on and you're like, oh, I should do that and let me go grab my seat. Number one, you're gonna piss somebody off really quickly. That's gonna be either the bus driver or the attendant on the bus. Number two, if your bag stays in the wrong spot, it may get left on a curbside because that attendant is literally grabbing the 10 bags in that spot, setting them on the curb and assuming people are picking up their bag. I've literally watched as the bus pulled away and there was 1 or 2 bags sitting on the curb that nobody had claimed yet. So listen to the attendants. When they ask you where you're going, there's a reason. They want to know where they should be putting your bags to make sure that you get it on the back end. Again, sometimes you get a ticket for your bag, other times you don't. It's based on the honesty policy. So just pay attention whenever you're handing your bags off. Always put a tag on your bag with your final destination. If you're going to be staying at a hostel in this next city and that's your only address that you have, put that address on there and put your name and put your phone number, because if your bag does end up in the wrong place, hopefully somebody will do the right thing and get that to you. Are you expecting free Wi-Fi on that bus that says free Wi-Fi? That's adorable. Don't expect it. Easily 50% of the buses that I've been on, they might have Wi-Fi at some point and then 10 minutes later it's gone, 10 minutes later it's back. Bottom line is, it's not reliable. You may not have plugs. Getting any actual work done, probably not gonna happen. Now that is dependent on whether you're on like a first class bus line or not. In Mexico, when I was traveling through Mexico, I was on buses that you had super cushy reclining seats, TVs, plenty of room, power outlets, and it was very clear on the websites what kind of bus you were getting because the literal bus company was like broken into tiers and there was the premium tiers and the shitty tiers, so you knew what you were getting. A lot of times when you're just budget traveling across the country, you're picking a cheap carrier and there's no specific as to what they may or may not have on that bus. But even if it says it's gonna have Wi-Fi, even if it says it's gonna have power outlets, don't depend on it. Take your power bank with you. Plan to use your Duolingo and learn a new language or catch up on podcasts. And if you can get any work done, if you can surf the web, bonus. You're #winning. Be wary of roadside pit stops. Depending on the route, those buses might stop and allow people to get off and use the bathroom or get some food at a roadside stop. The problem is if you're in a different country and you don't even understand what's being said over the loudspeaker, but you see people getting off the bus, you might be inclined to go, oh, we have time. And then all of a sudden you see a bus leaving while you're coming out of the bathroom and you're like, Example, I'm on a 6-hour bus ride from Mexico City to Oaxaca. This was my first international bus ride. I had no clue what I was doing. I was scared and I was reluctant to do anything out of the ordinary, like get off the bus until I was at my final destination. I don't understand Spanish. All of a sudden we pull into this roadside stop and people start getting off the bus. The bus driver says something over the speaker and people start getting off the bus, but not all the people, only about a quarter of the people. And I'm like, okay, and people go, and I see people making a beeline for the bathroom, and some people went to go get some churros, and I'm like, I'm not comfortable with this. Sure enough, with what seemed like very little notice, quite a few of the people had gotten back on the bus, and this bus driver starts backing up and starting to head forward. Woman in the back starts yelling because her husband's not on the bus yet. If I would have gotten off that bus, there wasn't gonna be anybody yelling to slow down. I'm a gringo in the middle of Mexico, with no bags, no nothing, and come on. So just be wary of pit stops. If you can't understand the language and you're completely uncertain, just stay in your seat. Use the bathroom before you get on the bus. Plan to use it after. There's usually a bathroom on the bus. Kind of scary, but always pay attention to whether the destination on your ticket is the final destination of the bus or the train. This kind of goes back to that luggage thing. A lot of times they have certain stops. So for instance, I was looking to get on a bus the other day from Bratislava to Vienna, and they had literally just given me that ticket. So I know that it had to be right, and I know what platform I was supposed to be on, but it did not say anything about Vienna on that platform. The reason for that is that Vienna was actually an intermittent stop, and the final destination is what was listed on that monitor. So get out your Google Translate, look at the ticket, ask some questions. There's friendly people in those places. Just make sure you're comfortable. This goes back to getting there early or, just kind of getting acclimated to the bus station, the environment, and all those things. So like a day or two after I have one of these conversations about bus travel and the fact that, I need to do something like that, I'm going to the bus station. I get there, and I'm like an hour and 15 minutes early, and I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at the monitor, and I'm like, where's my bus? I'm looking, I'm like, where's my bus? I'm looking, and I'm like, my bus isn't on here. I'm looking and I'm like, I bought a ticket for 3:30 in the morning instead of 3:30 at night. Always pay attention to whether you are on a 24-hour clock or a 12-hour clock. If you're coming from the United States, we use a 12-hour clock, and it can be really tricky to get used to the idea of a 24-hour clock, even if you've been in it for a long time. Because honestly, you're looking at your phone half the time, and unless you change that into a 24-hour clock, your brain is still saying 12-hour clock, but everything around you is functioning on 24-hour. 03:30, not the same as 15:30. 3:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon. So I'm standing there at a bus station 12 hours after my bus had left. Luckily, there were a lot of buses between those two cities, and I was able to literally get on one at the same time as I was supposed to, but that's not always gonna happen. Sometimes there might be two buses going from your destination to another one in the course of a day. So pay attention to that 24-hour clock. If you're traveling solo, you don't have anybody to give you checks and balances. If you're traveling with a friend, make sure you guys are watching each other to make sure you're not making stupid mistakes. Especially if you're like, hey friend, you take care of the bus tickets tomorrow. Yeah, check on each other. Checks and balances, it's a great thing. If you're flying solo, you're f***ed. All right, so there you go. That's all the stuff I've learned in the past couple years. I've been on more buses on this trip than I have in any previous trip, and every single bus is different. Every single bus station is different. Every way they're handled by the attendants is a little bit different, but there are obviously these common things. So don't be too afraid. Start small. Just grab a bus from your country to another country, or go to a city for a week and say, hey, I'm gonna do a side trip for a 2-hour ride over to this other city and a 2-hour ride back during the same day, and just get your feet wet. Beyond that, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I talk about a lot of stuff like this where, you know, it's rookie travel stuff that I'm still learning and I want to help you learn. So hit that subscribe button. Check me out over on Instagram at the Nomad Experiment. And yeah, share this with a friend. If you got somebody close to you that's been talking about doing this, send it their way. Really appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. I will catch you on the flip side. Peace.